Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive milestone for anyone out there aiming to break into the world of finance and accounting. We are going to take the comprehensive ICAI syllabus and transform it into a highly strategic, step-by-step masterclass to kickstart your chartered accountancy journey. I want you to think of the CA Foundation not just as some standard exam, but really as a 4-level gateway that you need to systematically unlock. Let's get into it.
Here's exactly how our roadmap plays out today. First, we'll look at your entry eligibility. Next up, the registration rules and the fees. Then, we are going to decode the subjective papers, followed right after by the objective papers, and finally, we'll wrap up with the ultimate 40-50 passing strategy. All right, level 1. Let's step into the lobby of this whole journey and figure out exactly who is eligible to actually play this game and when you can step onto the field. So the really cool thing here is that your timeline can start super early. You don't even have to wait until you finish high school. You can actually register right after passing your Class 10 exams. But there's a catch. To actually sit for the foundation exam, you've got to meet 2 specific conditions. First, you must have appeared for your Class 12 senior secondary exams. Second, you have to complete a mandatory 4-month study period, starting from your exact date of registration. And because these exams happen twice a year, in May and November, timing is everything. Basically, if you want to write the exam in November, you absolutely must be registered by July 1st. For the May exams, your cutoff is January 1st. Make sense? Now, what if I told you there's a shortcut? Well, there is, but you really have to earn it. Graduates and postgraduates who have a prescribed percentage of marks, as well as students who have already passed the intermediate level exams of either the Institute of Cost Accountants of India or the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, get a massive perk. They are completely exempted from this foundation level. If you fall into one of those categories, you essentially bypass this entire gateway and register straight for the intermediate course. But for everyone else, this foundation level is your absolute mandatory starting line. Moving right along to our second section, let's talk logistics. What gear do you need to get started? And frankly, what is it going to cost you to officially register with the ICAI? Breaking down the core fees straight from the institute, it's actually pretty straightforward. Indian students are looking at a central foundation registration fee of 9,000 rupees, while for foreign students, that fee sits at $700. On top of that, there are a couple of nominal costs you should know about. 200 rupees for the foundation prospectus, and an optional 400 rupees if you decide you want a 1-year subscription to the Members Journal. The best part? It's a completely transparent, centralized online process. No standing in lines, no physical visits required at all. And here is a huge relief. Let's say life just gets in the way. It happens, right? Well, your registration does not expire immediately. Once you pay that fee, you are locked in and valid for a full 3 years. If you don't clear the exams within that specific window, you still don't have to start from scratch. You can simply revalidate it for another 3 years by paying a specific revalidation fee. It just gives you that necessary breathing room to prepare properly without rushing. All right, now we are entering the absolute core of the syllabus. The first 2 major milestones. These are your subjective papers. And by subjective, I mean you'll be writing out detailed answers, clearly showing your working notes, and drafting formal, long-form responses. Let's look at how this setup dictates your entire exam strategy. You're facing 4 papers in total, each one worth 100 solid marks. Papers 1 and 2, those are your subjective heavyweights. And the absolute best thing about them is that there is 0 negative marking, literally none. You can and should attempt every single question without fear. On the flip side, papers 3 and 4 are objective, multiple-choice speed runs. In those, blind guessing will actively penalize you. This fundamental difference is a total game changer for how you practice for the 2 halves of this course. To make it super easy to remember the 4 massive pillars of this course, just lock the acronym ALME into your brain. ALME. That stands for Accounting, Law, Math, and Economics. Let's break down exactly what you need to master inside each of these pillars, starting off with the A. Unpacking the A in ALME, we have Paper 1, Principles and Practice of Accounting. This really tests your baseline understanding. First, you'll tackle the theoretical framework, like what exactly is the difference between capital and revenue expenditure. From there, you dive into real-world practical processes, like the bank reconciliation statement. Why is that so crucial? Because out in the real world, a company's internal cash book almost never perfectly matches their bank passbook, usually just because of timing differences, and you are the one who has to know how to reconcile them. You're also going to learn how to calculate depreciation, tracking how assets lose their value over time, and the strict rules for valuing inventories at either cost or net realizable value. But wait, there's more. This 100-marked paper also dives deep into what we call special transactions. A perfect example of this is consignments. This is when a business sends goods to an agent to sell, but the business actually retains ownership until that sale happens. How on earth do you record that in the books? You'll figure that out. You'll also learn to draft final accounts, which are basically the ultimate financial report cards for sole proprietors, partnerships, and companies. You even cover not-for-profit organizations where you'll learn exactly why they use an income and expenditure account instead of a traditional profit and loss account.
Okay, moving to the L in ALMI. Paper 2 is split into two really critical sections. Section A is worth 60 marks and is all about foundational business laws. You're going to study the Indian Contract Act of 1872 to learn exactly what makes a contract legally binding. You'll cover the Sale of Goods Act, partnership laws, and the Companies Act of 2013, digging into fascinating concepts like the corporate veil. Then, Section B makes up the remaining 40 marks, and it's totally dedicated to business correspondence. Listen, you can know all the complex accounting rules in the world, but if you can't communicate them clearly, you're stuck. This section tests you on active and passive voice, report writing, drafting formal professional emails, and even structuring a proper resume. Now we are officially transitioning into the danger zone with our final two papers, the objective section. Remember the rule here. Every wrong answer costs you marks. Precision isn't just important, it's everything. To absolutely maximize your score in paper 3, you need a clear strategy on where to focus your energy. This paper is sliced into 3 distinct parts. Business mathematics carries a hefty 40% weightage, statistics also carries 40%, and sitting right there in the middle is a highly scoring 20% dedicated entirely to logical reasoning.
Let's talk math first. The absolute most important concept you must master here is the time value of money. We're talking compound interest, annuities, and calculating the compound annual growth rate. Why is this so vital? Simply put, a rupee today is worth more than a rupee tomorrow. That single idea is the bedrock of all finance. You'll also be tackling equations and even some calculus. Meanwhile, that 20-mark logical reasoning section, that is exactly where smart students rack up points fast. It relies heavily on spotting visual and logical patterns in number series, mapping out direction tests, and solving fun but tricky seating arrangements and blood relation puzzles.
The final 40 marks of paper 3 belong entirely to statistics. This requires you to really grasp measures of central tendency, your mean, median, and mode, as well as dispersion. You're going to dive headfirst into probability and theoretical distributions like binomial, Poisson, and normal distributions. Plus, you'll learn how to construct index numbers. Now, a very quick word of warning for you. Probability and regression are the two areas where students constantly guess, get confused, and bleed points because of that negative marking rule. Don't fall for it. Master the core formulas so you can avoid those traps entirely. Finally, we've reached the E in our ALEA framework, paper 4. This one is split into 60 marks of business economics, where you're going to study the fundamental theories of demand, supply, and production costs. You'll learn exactly how prices are determined in vastly different market structures, like a monopoly versus perfect competition. This is perfectly paired with 40 marks on business and commercial knowledge, or BCK. BCK tests your awareness of the real-world business environment. We're talking macro government policies like foreign direct investment and crucial regulatory bodies like the RBI and SEBI. You're even expected to know your basic stock market and banking terminologies here. All right, we have reached the final stage of our explainer. You know the syllabus inside out, you know the basic rules, but how do you actually win this game? Let's break down the winning condition. The official text straight from the ICAI lays out a very strict dual condition lock that you must pick to conquer this gateway. Believe me, it is not as simple as just getting a passing grade on average. Here is the crucial takeaway I want you to burn into your memory, the 40-50 rule. Here is exactly how it works. You need a bare minimum of 40% in every single paper, no exceptions. But your combined aggregate of all 4 papers together must cross the 50% threshold. Let me give you a quick scenario. Imagine you score exactly 40 out of 100 on all 4 papers. Great, you met the first rule. But your total is only 160. Since the total available marks are 400, a 50% aggregate actually requires a score of 200. So with a 160, you failed the aggregate rule. You literally cannot just scrape by in this course. You absolutely must use your strongest subjects to pull up your overall aggregate score to cross that 200-mark finish line.
So let's do a quick recap. We've mapped out the timelines starting right after Class 10, the exact fee structures, the life-saving 3-year validity, and the massive difference between those subjective and objective papers. We decoded the vast ALME syllabus, accounting, law, math, and economics, and we just cracked the rigorous 40-50 passing strategy. You now have the map, the rules of the game, and the ultimate winning strategy. Remember, the CA Foundation isn't just an exam to pass. It is literally the gateway to your entire financial career. The clock is ticking on those May and November cutoffs. So, are you going to just read the syllabus, or are you going to master that 40-50 rule and absolutely guarantee your spot on the other side of this gate?